I'm Shahar Azani, and this is Israel at War. Following Hamas's barbaric attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, Israel continues with its offensive against Hamas in Gaza. This especially vile terrorist organization is using, as we all know, human shields as a strategy and embeds itself among ordinary civilians, which presents a considerable challenge for the Israel Defense Forces. This week, the IDF reached Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza, one of the milestones of this war, in a move which drew criticism from some international organizations and members of the media. Tune in to a special video released by the IDF spokesperson unit detailing what was found at the hospital upon entry.
So we're inside the MRI center of the Shifa Hospital. Israeli troops breached here a few hours ago, and we have cleared the area, make sure that it's safe. And a few of the most interesting things that we have found totally confirm, without any doubt, that Hamas systematically uses hospitals in their military operations in violation of international law. And what we have found, I think, is only the tip of the iceberg. Let me show you a few examples. Security cameras have been obstructed. All of the security cameras are covered, and this isn't the only one. You'll see the rest of them here. I don't know when it was used the last time, but it is definitely an MRI machine. And if you follow me behind the MRI machine, I'll show you what our troops exposed just minutes ago. In military terms, this is a grab bag, grab and go of a Hamas combatant. There is an AK-47. There are cartridges, ammo, there are grenades in here, of course uniform, and all of this was hidden very conveniently, secretly behind the MRI machine. We tried to uncover the cameras, but all of the cameras have been obstructed. You can see there's black tape covering it. And when our troops opened this closet here, which is in the main part of the clinic, this is what they found. The contents of the bag are full military kit for one Hamas terrorist. A live grenade, ammunition, fighting vest with insignia, boots, and of course uniforms, and last but not least, standard AK-47. Inside the hospital, hidden in a secluded area. Let's have a look at what we found inside the very same cabinet. There's insignia, military insignia, a knife. For those of you who read Arabic, you'll be able to understand what it says here. But it's Hamas, the military wing, Kataib al-Qassam, of course a vest with equipment, and as always an AK-47, standard gear, grab and go, tactical radio, communications, which we will analyze, and a computer which at first glance already provides a lot of incriminating evidence.
Joining us all the way from Israel is our good friend, Ambassador Danny Ayalon. Thank you, Danny, for joining us all the way from Israel. How are you doing, first and foremost?
I'm fine. Thank you, Shahar. My pleasure. Well, the whole family is mobilized. My youngest daughter is with the paratroops. She was called to her reserve duty when the war started more than a month ago. My wife and the other daughter are raising a lot of funds for Magen David Adom. And I'm trying humbly to do whatever I can do with some interviews to the international media.
And thank you for doing that, because we were just mentioning in the introduction about the IDF's operation in Gaza and the entry into Al-Shifa Hospital. And there is much confusion out there as to an army entering a hospital. So if you could please just provide some factual elaboration for our viewers so that they understand what is Al-Shifa Hospital and what exactly is happening that the IDF is entering a hospital.
So we have to understand the Shifa Hospital is a complex of 14 different buildings. It's a huge area which has all turned into a Hamas headquarters and a Hamas bunker, and underground their Hamas headquarters, command and control, munitions, and a lot of was just dug out and found. Now, also it should be noted that whether it's a hospital or any other place that was taken over or is taken over by a terror organization, then it's no longer under any kind of immunity. This is something which has to be very clear. This is the Geneva Convention. Now, Israel did not bomb the hospital, did not storm into the hospital. Out of this complex, Israeli special troops entered one building out of this 14, and they pre-advised the staff that they are coming, so there won't be any shooting. It was a very painstaking operation. The soldiers that went in, they had Arab-speaking soldiers with medical crews, and they brought in a lot of medical crews and equipment to the hospital, and there were no shootings in the hospital. The only shooting took place outside of the main entrance, where 5 Hamas terrorists tried to block the soldiers coming in, and they shot at them. They all were killed. All these 5 terrorists were killed, and since then, the operation went very smoothly, and they went from room to room, questioning the staff. They really wanted to get some info and intelligence about our hostages. Unfortunately, hostages were not found there. Hamas had enough time to move them out, but it was obvious that many of the hostages were taken into the Shifa after this terrible slaughter of the October 7th. About 200 Hamas terrorists with kidnapped Israelis went into the Shifa, but they had enough time to move them probably to other places. In any case, right now, in this one building out of 14 buildings of the Shifa complex, IDF is there. No casualties. No one is hurt from the staff, nor from the patients over there. They did find underneath tunnels, command and control center, a lot of weapons, and everything is out there on record. But the IDF is still there.
So the first important point, I mean, you're making excellent points, but I just want to make it clear to our viewers. Under international law, the fact that Hamas is abusing a Shifa complex as a military command and control center, that means that it's a legitimate target for any army and for the Israeli Defense Forces in their offensive against terrorist organization Hamas. That's correct?
Absolutely. And I also would remind everybody, hospitals in Mosul and Fallujah during the Daesh, the war against ISIS, when ISIS used these hospitals in Iraq, these hospitals were bombed by allied forces, which is fine, again, which is
legitimate target.
Legitimate
right.
Target according to Geneva Convention. Israel did not storm any hospital. They did not bomb. We could have bombed it from the air. We did not do it. Quite the contrary. We moved special operations with medical supplies, with doctors, and, looking from room to room without hurting anybody. Quite the contrary. They brought in a lot of medical supplies. They went down all the way to the underground bunkers that Hamas built, and they found there lots of weapons, lots of equipment, military equipment, and it's all recorded now. This is only one, Shahar, 1 out of 14. So there are 13 more buildings to go, probably in the same painstaking way. By the way, we put our own soldiers at risk.
Exactly. I was going to ask you that, because what you're saying is that such an operation, you can imagine the delicacy of exposing IDF soldiers to that risk, bearing in mind the fact that Israel is letting them know that we're coming. So Israel is coming. Absolutely. They get head notice. They get time to evacuate and maybe booby trap some of the bunkers there.
Absolutely, and it's also all recorded. How the IDF is calling the hospital, telling them, we are coming in. Do not worry. We're only going after the Hamas terrorists. We are not going to shoot. No accidental engagements. And it is indeed a risk to our soldiers. Now, I will let you know also one thing, Shahar, which is very important. Hamas has hoped for a bloodbath. All Hamas wanted is to see pictures of Israeli soldiers killing civilians or patients at the hospital. This is what they wanted to see. We understood it quite well. This is also a war about the legitimacy. And this is why we took our time. See, the ground operation started more than 2 weeks ago, but we were moving very, very slowly in order to clear out a path, in order to take out all the terrorists with their bunkers outside the Shifa. They have the whole perimeter, protecting themselves.
Right.
So Israel on a very slow pace, in order first and foremost to protect our soldiers, to minimize casualties on our side, but also to minimize casualties on uninvolved Gazans. And this operation has gotten into the core of Shifa last night. But as I repeat again, Shifa is a complex of 14 different buildings. So far, only one building was penetrated with no casualties whatsoever for Israeli soldiers and no casualties on the patients or the medical staff. The only killed were 5 terrorists of Hamas outside this building that tried to prevent the Israeli forces to move in.
Right. And the anticipation is that the Israel Defense Forces will go through the rest of the complex in their attempts to identify Hamas's personnel and hopefully some clues for the whereabouts of Israeli hostages?
Absolutely. And again, unfortunately, they had enough lead time, so most of them fled. By the way, what also our soldiers found in the underneath the underground bunkers, a lot of Hamas terrorist uniforms.
Oh, right.
Evidently, they just quickly changed from uniforms to some civilian clothing, and many of them probably left, on this humanitarian corridor that Israel created from Gaza city down south.
Down south. Danny, you're one of the most experienced Israeli officials to appear on international media. And we know that the facts that you're describing are so straightforward as far as understanding the situation. And yet in communicating it to the world, many elements within the media are, let's just say, not very favorable towards Israel. We've seen the BBC's mistake when they actually announced on the air, misquoted the IDF spokesperson when they said that the IDF is targeting medical personnel, especially Arab speakers, whereas, as you say, the IDF was bringing in medical personnel, including Arab speakers. How do you propose people overcome this gap of information that exists in trying to understand what's happening beyond, of course, watching JBS? What else can we do to make sure that people get the message that you're so eloquently sharing with us?
Well, they should all demand first-hand information on record that cannot be falsified. The records, the horrendous graphics that we have from the slaughter on October 7th cannot be falsified and cannot be let's say ignored or
right.
just casually be
set aside,
put into
right.
fake news. Same thing is with the IDF operation, and the same thing with the Shifa entrance. I think this is what should everybody demand, and look into various sources. IDF spokesman is a very, very reliable source. Sometimes at the cost of losing the first news cycle. Just like 3 weeks ago, Shahar, if you remember, when the Palestinians bombed their own hospital and they blamed Israel.
Right.
Exactly. And the IDF was not quick to deny, because they checked and double-checked before they came out with the evidence. So just look for the evidence, not the reports. For evidence, IDF has a lot of evidence on record. And I would say also some other media sources that are on the ground, they collect informations, and JBS is always a reliable source.
And especially when we're having you on. Ambassador, I'm thinking about what you just mentioned, about the videos, the graphics of the massacre that occurred on October 7th. And every day we find more atrocious details, more footages coming out. And yet it seems that too many people out there in the world are quick to forget or even ignore. We've heard that the parliament in Belgium refused to screen, the horror film provided by Israel to its members. In light of this ignorance of Israel's pain and suffering, how do you propose Israel breaches that gap of information? If they're unwilling to see it, what more can be done? Especially when, as you well know, some people argue that it's Israeli AI that manufactured those images. What a horrible accusation.
Right. Well, I would say what we should concentrate is, first of all, on our friends and allies, like in the United States, like in many countries in Europe. We should concentrate on those who are undecided, those who are on the fence, to show them the facts. And we should totally ignore countries like Belgium, which are, I would say, it's anti-Semitic in their approach. So the countries that, like Turkey, accusing us of massacre instead of the others, it's just all fake news. It's and we should ignore it altogether. There's no way we can win in the Arab media, in the Al Jazeeras of the world.
Right.
BBCs, I think we should still give it a fight, because they accuse us and then they apologize, accuse us again. But we should call them out all the time, like we have in the past. And the one thing I think the entire world should demand from BBC is to call them for what they are. They would not utter the word terrorist adjacent to Hamas. Hamas is a terror organization worse than ISIS.
Agreed.
And they're still not calling them a terror organization. This BBC should be called out. But with all the other Arab media or anti-Semitic info that we get in Turkey, or I wouldn't waste any time with them.
Danny, I want to ask you specifically about the current situation vis-a-vis the hostages. Clearly, Hamas knew very well what they were doing in dragging, the elderly, children, babies, families back into the darkness of Gaza, and its ability to kind of hold it against Israel, knowing the history and how much we care about our people. Where do we stand on this? Is this still considered to be one of the major goals of the Israeli war against Hamas? And what's being done to the best of what can be shared now?
No, absolutely. This is the major goal. I mean, we have actually the two major goals is, of course, to actually dismantle Hamas and to free the hostages. And they are on an equal base in terms of the importance. The thing is about the tactics. Some said, well, maybe we should negotiate with Hamas. They tried and failed. And the other tactic, which has vindicated itself, is only to put pressure on Hamas. With a ground operation and more military pressure on Hamas, that makes them rethink and negotiate on better terms. So far, we have not breached the gap. And again, it's cruel, it's ruthless, but Hamas is trading with its hostages in the most, I would say, cruel, but very cold and calculated way. All Hamas wants is to buy time so they can regroup. And this is where they have tried to just trickle, drip hostages, like 5 a day, 2 a day, so they can, and of course, during this release of 2, 3 a day, they demanded ceasefire. With ceasefire, they regroup, of course, and rearm. And Israel cannot accept that. With the military operation going as it is, very successfully and on schedule, now they are upping the numbers. And Israel's demand is very clear. All for all, it means release all the hostages, regardless of nationality, of gender, of age, and everything else. And Israel is willing to release all these terrorists that are in Israeli jail, thousands of them. Hamas does not want it. They want to use them as a
life insurance.
as a leverage. Yes. So this is still where the negotiations are going. It's too bad that there's not enough pressure on the international organizations like the UN and ICRC, the International Red Cross. The International Red Cross, we expect them to be there, whether they are called or not. But the demand should be, first of all, to get a list of the hostages.
Right.
We did not even get a list of the hostages. All we have is through intelligence that we have gathered. But again, this is something which is inhumane, against all international conventions, and it's another war crime of Hamas. Not only they have not released the list of who they hold in custody, they do not allow ICRC to visit them to see their conditions.
Right.
And so this is one thing that ICRC and the international community has failed to do. The other thing is to really put the pressure on Hamas. And most of the negotiations, Shahar, are being held through Qatar. Qatar is the country which has the most leverage over Hamas. Without Qatar financing and political support, Hamas would not be in existence. And I think there's a lot of pressure that has not been brought to bear on Qatar to put their pressure on Hamas. If Qatar stood to lose out of failed negotiations, maybe they would have been more aggressive and demanding Hamas to release the hostages. This has not happened yet. So we are now in this fog of negotiations, if you will, and this is terrible. It's very taxing. It's inhuman for the families of the kidnapped, of the refugee, of the hostages
for almost a month and a half. It's an incredible point in time where we see so clearly from these organizations, the UN and the international community, that when it comes to Israeli hostages, Jewish Israeli, there is simply not an ounce of sympathy. They're not even fulfilling their mission when it comes to Israeli hostages. You don't hear anybody decrying the fact that 10-month-old, baby Kfir Bibas is held by Hamas for such a long time, and yet you're so quick to demand the ceasefire to support Hamas, which is an incredible moment of actual clarity, to be honest. It's a moment where we see clearly where these organizations are, but it's also very sad for us as humanity and as a society.
We deal with sheer evil. You cannot call them animals. Right. Animals are
I love
innocent compared to them.
I agree.
They are just monsters. It's sheer evil, and this is what we face. I don't know if you've heard, but we also now have evidence that one of the hostages gave birth to a baby in captivity.
Can you imagine coming into the world in that darkness? Danny, you mentioned Qatar. Where is Iran when it comes to this? I vaguely remember an offer by the kind Iranians offering to host the hostages in Tehran. Are they an integral part of the game as much as Qatar? Who holds more of a leverage and who is more relevant in these discussions?
It's Qatar. It's only Qatar, and all the pressure should be on them. Iran and the Ayatollahs, in this case, are irrelevant. They are the mastermind of all the instability and wars and terrorism in the Middle East. But in this specific case of the hostages, it's only Qatar. Iran couldn't care less. Iran couldn't care less about any of its proxies here. They're fighting till the last Palestinian, till the last Lebanese with Hezbollah, till the last Yemen and the Houthis. The Iranians are very careful not to get involved directly, only through the proxies.
Do you expect a larger scale operation on the side of Israel in the northern front, based on what we've seen this past week with the killing of, attacking workers of the electrical company in Israel, innocent civilians who were doing infrastructure work? Also, quite a few soldiers were hit and hurt on the northern front.
Well, that would depend on how and when the operation, the war in Gaza will end. The way it will end, which I believe with the dismantling of Hamas, that would be a lesson to Hezbollah, that they could come next if they do not fulfill their international obligations under UN Security Council Resolution 1701. They should be actually outside, with a perimeter. They should not be on the border. In fact, they should be dismantled. 1701 called for the dismantling of unauthorized militias,
right,
armed militias in Lebanon, and actually give the sovereignty back to the Lebanese government. So I believe that the demand would be for Hezbollah to clear away the border, to move north beyond the Litani River, so there will be a security zone for Israel. But
right,
there is no way that we can allow Hezbollah terrorists to be smack dab against our
fence, settlement,
border,
towns and villages in the north. You're right. I just want to ask you, the final goal of this war is dismantling Hamas as a viable force militarily and politically on our southern border. So for them, there is no horizon. Like beyond this war, they're no longer going to be in control of the Islamic Caliphate that they created in the Gaza Strip. Is that still the goal of Israel in this war?
Oh, absolutely. With Hamas, there's no negotiation. There's no coexistence. They do not want it, and they are the ones who have declared the war and started it. So they will have to be actually neutralized altogether. If we want to ever have any prospect for peace, we cannot have Hamas-type, ISIS-type organizations. At the end of the day, Israel does not have any intentions to repossess Gaza, but there may be an interim period by which we will have to control the security situation over there, create a buffer zone. No more we will have Gazan people at our border. There will have to be a perimeter, and someone else will have to govern Gaza, whether it's the Palestinian Authority, which is very weak at this point,
right,
maybe some international or an Arab League or pan-Arabic structure for administration for the time being, until at the end of the day we'll have to have elections in Gaza. And elections in Gaza, not like in 2006, Hamas should not be participating because it's a terror organization.
right.
Only political parties which do not have an armed militia. You cannot really go with bullets into the ballots. And we have a very good example in Bosnia in 1995, after this bloody war. Elections in Bosnia that took place under some international supervision prescribed that only legitimate parties can run, and anyone who wanted to run had to disarm if they were a militia. This should be the case also in Gaza. We didn't make this. We did try to make the point, but unfortunately at that time, the international community forced on us. And I clearly remember my good friend Condoleezza Rice, which was the Secretary of State, demanded on elections, and without the demand that they will disarm before they run to elections.
Danny, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you. We thank you for your strength, resilience, optimism, and wise analysis, especially during these dire times that we all go through. Thank you so much.
Shahar, you are too kind. Thank you.
Stay safe, sending you and your family the best wishes. We're all with you. And just know that we are with the people of Israel during these times, thinking about you and doing our best to stand by the people of Israel. And to all of our viewers, I'd like to say thank you so much for watching. We will continue to update you here on JBS as things move forward in Israel, which is always important to remember and remind is not just about Israel and Hamas, but has a great moral, strategic ramifications for Israel and for the entire world. May we see better days. I'm Shahar Azani, and thank you all for watching.